Well, I mean, to go. I mean, anybody out there who doesn't up to date on what happened in India this weekend in Mumbai, you basically had what may be as few as 10 terrorists held the city of Mumbai hostage, more or less, for 3 days, killed 200 people, injured more than 300, and the Indian government's response was absolutely disastrous in the outcome. Cenk?
Yeah. Look, I got a lot to say about this, unsurprisingly. Number one, it was very scary how coordinated it was and how successful it was, quite honestly. And what I'm amazed by is that they moved from target to target with apparently no response from Indian authorities.
All right, let's wrap up this India talk. What's the long-term strategy?
Finally, the long-term strategy, and this is real long-term, is secular people throughout the world have got to fight back against religion. It's unilateral disarmament, and it's insane, man. It's literally killing us. Religion doesn't make any sense, and we keep letting people pretend that it does, and then other folks talk them into killing other people based on the religious texts. Now, I know I've gone through it a million times. I love good religious people, and they're not all fundamentalists. Yeah, of course. But unfortunately, if you don't knock down the texts are nuts. So you're always going to get some people who say, well, if God is true and religion is true, well, then I have to follow this book, which tells me to kill people.
Well, don't you think they kind of make that decision to kill people and then they just use the book to justify it?
Well, that's a great question, but I definitely think it's a little of both. So I'm not under the delusion that if you get rid of religious texts or religious dogma, that all of a sudden everybody's going to hold hands and there's going to be rainbows and nobody's going to commit any violent acts. No, of course not. But at the same time, it would be nice if we took away the thing that they think rules their lives that tells them to kill other people. And I can hear, like, Muslims now, and if Christians are listening and they are interpreting what I said as against the Bible, which it partly certainly is, and them saying, no, those are all misinterpretations of the Quran and misinterpretations of the Bible. Really? Well, then read those texts. Because in the Quran, it does tell you to kill the unbelievers in certain parts. In other parts, it tells you to love them. Who knows? They're full of contradictions. In the Bible, it tells you to love your neighbor, and then it tells you that Jesus brings a sword, let alone the crazy Old Testament. Why do we continue to tolerate things that are not true and never fight back? I mean, they fight back with guns, and we're afraid to fight back with ideas.
Well, because I don't think ideas are enough. I mean, if you look at the one part of the world that's basically secular now, and it's Europe, right? Mm-hmm. The only part, basically.
Yeah.
Except maybe Japan. But these states all have very strong social safety nets and welfare systems. And outside of these states, what you more or less have is you have despotic countries with very little rule of law, and nobody's taking care of the poor, except the religious organizations. So that's who they turn to.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, that is part of addressing this issue. Second of all, look at China. They got nearly 1 billion people who don't believe in any religion. We can't get that through our heads. I was talking to a family.
Yeah, but Cenk, they didn't get that 1 billion people not believing in religion through, like, debate.
Well,
they didn't convince them, it's all BS, don't believe it. No, I mean, they took people out and they shot them.
Well, that's partly true. They also didn't have a history of Christianity or Islam like in other parts of the world.
They actually have one that's even worse, which was the Taiping Rebellion in the 19th century. Mm-hmm. Bloodiest civil war in human history, something like 80 million people, 100 million people killed. Because this guy thought he was Jesus Christ's little brother. And they fought it out.
No, I know. And you got Buddhism and you got, Taoism and some, although I'll take those in a second. But overall, are there a lot of Chinese terrorists running around? No, there aren't. I mean, I know it's different and it's not perfectly analogous, but at the same time, that's 1 billion people that aren't listening to some crazy religious text telling him to kill everybody that isn't them.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a good start. It's just my main problem, and I'll get beyond it, now, and we'll talk about Obama, but my main problem is that the secular people, generally speaking, never fight back because they feel it's offensive to religious people to fight back, even just as a matter of ideas. But they offend me greatly when they murder 200 people in Mumbai. Okay, so I would like to do a little battle back right at them, and not just in the short term and the long and the midterm with guns, but in the long term with ideas.
What if they don't like your ideas?
Well, then we go to the short term.